And it reminded me of this Buddhist teaching, anicca. Anicca means change, impermanence. In this context, it means life and death. Things change. The seasons change. The world that you came out of is nothing but change. The world that you came out of has an autumn and a spring. It all changes. Your life is change. And while because we are wired in a certain way to be cautious around new and different things, that's because we are wired that way because we're part of this nature that needed to protect itself just to genetically continue. We're a little nervous about new and different, but new and different is the fact of life. And so we need to be careful with our fear and not let it scare us. Just have it. Don't be afraid of your fear. The choir and the musicians and your presence and everything. I have missed you all. And I think to be back, to say I'm happy to be back sounds trite, but I am. I'm happy to be back. I was thinking about it over the... So, as many of you know, I've been gone for 5 weeks, and my intention was to go to Canada, work briefly on the boat, get it ready, put it in the water, and then sail this boat with an expert sailor, a friend of mine who was going to kind of tune me up on how to sail a boat like this, which is different than any boat I'd ever had. And yet he had lived on one for 10 years, so he knew many of the tricks that I wanted to learn. It turns out that about week 2, we were beginning to realize we were never going to get the boat in the water, that the repairs were taking us longer. There's a couple of lessons in there, but let me give you the briefest one possible. And that is that I had been anticipating the repairs on this boat from the time we took it out of the water last year, because that's when we damaged it. And I gave a lot of rumination to it. I tend to do that. I tend to rethink it, think it, rethink it, etc. when it's something that's bugging me. And I realized last year that as I think about things, so I make the problem bigger. Well, I must have done a tremendous amount of thinking. Now, I'm going to try to explain this very simply, but this boat has 3 hulls, and it's held together by a big wing in between it, and holding it up on the trailer are 2 bars, and those bars can go up and down based on 4 large jacks that are already in place. I didn't think they worked, so I bought some more jacks to make them work, to make that go up and down. We got it up, but we couldn't get it to come back down. The idea was get it up, put it on blocks, and then pull the trailer away so we could get to where we had to work. A week of messing with that, off and on, I could not get it to work. I finally deflated the tires. Then a man who worked at the marina came by and he says, have you thought of this? And we did that, and with that, it dropped. There went a week. Well, anyway, isn't that perfect metaphor for the whole thing about overthinking it? You jack it up, but now you can't stop thinking about it, right? And therefore it can't settle back into a place where it actually can be fixed. And so it is so often with our thoughts. I think part of the reason prayer or intentionality doesn't work is we don't let it go. Do you know what I mean? We don't just go, well, that's the way to do it. Now a trust that everything's going to work out. And all the things that are working out in your life, aren't they just working out without you thinking about them anyway? So maybe you should do that on the things that aren't working. Stop thinking about it in the same way. Just let it go and see if it happens, right? Okay, that was a freebie. Here's what I really want to talk about. So after that, we drove the van to Chicago Midway Airport and caught planes the next day. He went back to Moab, and I went off to California. I was going to do a memorial for my best friend. It had been 9 months. He died in January. I was in the room for the last week of his life and was there the night he died, but I never grieved. And part of it was it didn't seem real to me. I know I was there. I saw the body not breathing. All the evidence was there. It just never seemed real. And so as I was flying there, and as I was there a day beforehand, I felt fear about doing this memorial. Now, I couldn't quite name what the fear was about, but I'm really sure I know now that the fear was that I had not grieved and I was not prepared to do service in the way it should have been done for him. So I lie down to go to bed, and I ask a prayer, help me get whatever I need for this. And it comes to me what I'm going to say, but it also comes to me with tears. And I have that sense of finally breaking that spell that I was under, that I couldn't quite grok that he had died. And Stephen, even now, I still can't, to a great degree, mourn a 50-year relationship that was as primary as any it has ever been in my whole life. We met on the Grand Canyon. I was 20 years old, sitting on the sand. My second day as a trainee, we started talking, and we became instant friends and kept it up the rest of our lives. And so it was an important event. And now something else was happening that also could have caused some fear. I've been a minister for almost 30 years now. But I had never done anything ministerial with the same people I did rivers with. I had two worlds. I had the outer world and I had this inner world. And never, I mean, they knew what I did. I didn't hide it, but I never did anything. So now I'm the master of ceremonies and the last speaker and all that. And one of the things that strikes me about this is that I'm listening to all these not obituaries, they're remembrances from his work life, from his daughter's life, from his stepchildren's life, from his river life. And in every one of those settings, they describe the same person in business, as a father, as a stepfather, as a boatman, as a friend, as a spouse. They describe the same person. And this person now had become, even to me who knew him for 50 years, more clear that he was the same guy inside and out. He treated people the same, in business and wherever. What really struck me, was that two of his stepchildren got up to sing his praises. Now, that didn't always happen, but he had done a lot for them, as he had done a lot for the river community, as he had done a lot for the business people. He was a financial advisor. He had clients come, but he also had people he had mentored come. It was his way of doing things. So when I got up to speak, I didn't speak about him hardly at all. That had been done. But what I did speak about was how he affected us and how he was a reflection of the best of us in that relationships we had with him. Now, because of that, something began to click for me, which is what I'd really like to talk about, which is essentially that the inner and the outer are the same, and it comes on a day in which the sun is up as much as it's down, that we're at an equilibrium. This is the equinox, and this is when things are dying to be reborn in the spring. This is when change is happening, and it is the colors come, but also the leaves fall. And what I think is really profound is that if we can get this, we'll realize that the outer and the inner of us are the same. So now, just to help you spot what might be keeping it from seeming that way, is we talk about the ego, and what the ego's job is to maintain the body, essentially. I think that's where it really started. And then it becomes a self-identity, which might include more than the body, what you have, what you've done, etc., like that, your thoughts, and that you are right. You know, that's the ego's big task, but that's essentially to hold together this idea of a separate identity of some sort. If we put the ego aside, mentally, put it aside for a moment, then a better definition of what's happening with you is not the maintenance of that, but the breath. And the breath comes in and the breath goes out. You breathe in the world and you breathe out into the world. And there is actually just one body of air, right? The inner and the outer air is the same air. And the nature of your body and the nature of your responses to the world and all that stuff, the development of your DNA, your personality, so much of that is influenced by the outer world. You know, we as egos think of ourselves as a separate identity, and in so many ways we think of ourselves as separate than the world we live in, as though somehow we popped out of nowhere. But genetically, you know that your DNA has been in process for about 1 billion years, and you're just one more example of this evolutionary process that has allowed you to develop with arms and legs and eyes, etc. And if you look at the genetics, we're only like 1% different than the great apes. And we're very much similar to mice, close enough that they can make medicines used in mice as the test animal. Mice, right? We're part of this thing. We're not separate. Now, biologically, that's absolutely true, but psychologically, we have taken leave of absence of the world and think of ourselves as separate. And that's that little ego working on it again. Oh, I'm over here. I'm separate. But the breath and genetics and the way the trees and the animals cooperate to exchange gases, energy, whatever. It's all one thing. It's all one thing. We are not separate. And it could be quite comforting to realize that your death fits right into the process of your birth. That it's not separate either. It's not like the great accident that happened to you, the thing that should never have happened. I should never get sick and I should never die. Oh my God. Let's take a poll here. Who knows somebody who's lived forever? How many of us answering that with none would say, I know I'm going to die, and really get it? But we are. We're part of this evolutionary process that involves not only birth but death. And that this death that came to my friend was on time. Not that long after that, my ex-wife was diagnosed with liver cancer. And it's like, I had she seems to be doing pretty well with it. And I had beautiful conversations with her, in part because she is at risk of dying. What needs to be said? What heartfelt emotion needs to be felt? What moments do we have together to eat and to laugh? But this one, here, now, and it makes here and now so real, so important, because there is and will be an end point. This is not a failure on her part. She did not fail because she got a disease. He did not fail because he got pancreatic cancer. He is not the loser of life. He finished life. And the very words I said to him The moment he died is you did it. You finished. I thought it odd. I said that, but I was so happy he finished. And I was thinking then, reading a book recently, and the book said, what was Jesus' last words? It is finished. Some translate, it is fulfilled. I have completed. All that I was here to do, I have done. And my friend, his name is Dave. Dave died the way he lived, and most of us will. And if you want to be good at dying, you should be really good at living, because that's the momentum of your life. So my friend finished, and it reminded me of this Buddhist teaching, anicca. Anicca means change, impermanence. In this context, it means life and death. Things change. The seasons change. The world that you came out of is nothing but change. The world that you came out of has an autumn and a spring. It all changes. Your life is change. And while because we are wired in a certain way to be cautious around new and different things, that's because we are wired that way, because we're part of this nature that needed to protect itself just to genetically continue. We're a little nervous about new and different, but new and different is the fact of life. And so we need to be careful with our fear and not let it scare us. Just have it. Don't be afraid of your fear. It's just chemical reaction inside your body. It's not the truth. It's what happens to an organism that came up with your genetic disposition. But the truth is, you're wise enough to realize it's just something new. Don't panic. I tell this story, I should tell you. In my family, we tell stories over and over, right? Your family probably does the same thing. Their favorite stories, and one of my favorite stories is my nephew, who is called Neusom also. He was about 3 years old, and he was a big kid for his age, but and sometimes you kind of think they should be smarter than they are, but he was 3 years old, and he goes, I want to go swimming. Well, it's November, it's a little chilly at the beach, and he goes out, and where everybody else is on the dock, he starts going out, and he gets up to his neck, and it's cold too. And his father says to him, hey, Neusom, what's the main thing? He said, don't panic. Just because you feel it, it isn't the truth. Necessarily, it might be, but don't panic. And since we all will die, except for you, of course, since we all face this multiple times in our life, I have a couple of phrases that I picked up in the last. One is, to love is to lose. Now, it sounds negative, but every person you love, you will lose. You'll either lose because they leave you, or something changes and it no longer happens that you love them, or you'll lose because you leave them. To love is to lose. But so does that mean because you're afraid of losing, you don't love? Quite the contrary. You just cherish the fact that your heart can open now. For there will be a time when it will cost you. So love it when you love it. And don't be afraid to love it. Courage, the heart, needs to be engaged. Your heart needs to love whether it's going to hurt or not. Or you could just be a lump on a log, but... And so there's that, and I had another great phrase which just escaped me at the moment, but I want to come back to this idea of how do we train ourselves to become aware at a deep enough level that change is the way it is, and that life and death are just tied together as perfectly as can be, just like the right end of a stick and the left end of the stick are connected. The beginning and the end, they're connected. They're inseparable. Loving and losing are inseparable. It's okay. Don't panic. It's the way it is. And yet, between those two poles is life. It is a chance to love. It is a chance to be kind to other people, to make a mark in the world by doing what is you do best, by being generous and being remembered even for being generous. That's what the space between the beginning and the end is for. It's not for worrying about it or blaming yourself because you're coming to the end, or saying someone must have sinned that they don't live forever, and don't spend your time bargaining with God that, hey, if I eat vegetables all day long and pray, I will never have to deal with that. It's not likely to work, and might be a waste of time. It might be that you're trying to avoid something rather than to enjoy something. That the whole of this experience will not be easy, but it is a profound invitation to engage fully and to take your lumps when they happen and not be afraid, or so afraid that you don't take a chance, that you just go for it. There's a story I want to tell you that I told at his memorial. So my friend, first and all life ambition was adventure. He used to watch, those shows like American Sportsman, and actually one time in our 30s he was the star of American Sportsman for one of the segments. But he wanted adventure. He led him to leave one marriage to start another one. He wanted adventure. He engaged life in a way that not everybody would have gone, wow, that was really brilliant. But he was always after adventure. So he is dying. And a friend of mine who didn't know him tells this story to me at one point. She says, I can help people across the barrier from life into the next thing, and I do that. So she wakes up in the middle of the night and she helps this guy, my friend. She goes to him and says, listen, you're dying. This is psychically, You're dying, and I can help you. Now, I'll hold your hand, and we will walk toward the light. And as we get to the light, I want you to let go of my hand and begin a new adventure. And my friend goes, a new adventure? He didn't touch her hand, didn't wait for her, anything. He was gone. And she didn't even know him. So I take it to be the truth. So this is a brilliant way to live your life. As an adventurer, knowing that at some point you won't get a chance to do that in the same way in this body. It won't happen. Your ability to enjoy life largely hinges on this thing. Don't panic. Nothing is that important that you would waste your time worrying about it. Take my experience of getting the jack to come down. I didn't consciously plan that thing, but it was an incredible metaphor for the way I had treated the problem. rather than solve the problem and let it go, jack it up, bring it down, it's stuck. It's stuck in the up position, in the alert, the ready to act position. It's stuck there. It didn't relax. And because it didn't relax, I didn't get to relax either. But it was a reflection of me, because the inner and the outer are the same. And as you are, so the world begins to reflect it back to you. And so it becomes incredibly important to do two things. One is to realize that your innards and your outwards, what seems other than you, are not separate. That's the illusion of the ego. And so as you think and as you move in the world, so the world thinks and moves, come back to you. It repeats. And often it starts the song, and then you repeat. But you are one and the same. And some people call that God. Those boatman friends of mine don't use that word, God, except with an expletive afterwards. And I didn't use the word God because it's so nondescriptive of the nature of the way things really are, in my opinion. There is no outer being that's hovering out there with a face. It is the whole of it is the God. Is the God that it is the other, the magical other, the spiritual other, the transcendent other, is all of that. And it turns out that we feel that other often, but when we really look, just like the breath, it is this continuum that comes all the way into who you are. And you are that other just as much as the other is other. You're that. So remember that you're living a life that is a life that you can choose to live as excited and happy and forthright as you can. And there will be pain and suffering in that, because that's the way this one's shaped here. But the other is not separate from you, and it is a safe-ish world to do whatever you want to do, because it wants you to do you. Not you, the ego, you the being, the consciousness. And at some point you'll drop this shape, you'll pick up another one, or maybe not. I don't know what happens. But outer and inner are the same. When the I be single, that's when you're awaking. When you see the world that's out there and in here is the same. When you hold the gap in your hands and you realize, I'm making this up, that I'm not part of it. When you see that, it comes together. And the left end of the stick and the right end of the stick are the same. And your birth and your death, necessary. Let's make a point to practice paying attention to our breath until our breath teaches us enough that we can not panic. Let us pray. In this moment, feel the breath. The breath comes in, the breath goes out. There is only one air. The breath begins, the breath ends. Still one breath. The breath nourishes and the breath cleanses. And somewhere there's a tree that says, thank you for taking that oxygen away from me and giving me carbon dioxide. And we say to the tree, thank you for giving me oxygen. I'm happy to give you carbon dioxide. one continuum, inside, outside. One life with a birth and a death. And one more step. When you see another and they influence you, it is part of the process. And your ripple effect of who you are affects the world around you. Let us find the peace, the fearlessness, and the joy of this life, that we might be a ripple in the sea of humanity that lifts the whole a little higher. Breath in, breath out. Amen. I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.